Captain Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the massive wall of energy that marked the edge of human space. The barrier stretched as far as his sensors could reach, a shimmering curtain of light that had kept humanity hidden for 50 years. No one knew what lay beyond it. No one dared to find out. "Sir, we're receiving another distress call from the outer colonies," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant J-Ho. "The Vorthan raiders hit the mining station on Kepler 7. They took everything and killed anyone who resisted." Hyun-woo clenched his fists. The pirate attacks were getting worse every month. The raiders seemed to grow bolder as they moved closer to human space, as if they thought the barrier would protect them from pursuit. They were wrong about that, but they might be right about something else. The barrier might protect them from whatever was behind it. Dr. So-min looked up from her science station. Her face was pale, and Hyun-woo could see worry in her eyes. She had been studying the human barrier for 3 years, ever since joining his crew. What she found there kept her awake at night. "Captain, I need to show you something," she said. "The energy readings from the barrier have changed again. They're stronger than last week. Much stronger." Hyun-woo walked over to her station. The screen showed waves of energy moving through the barrier like a heartbeat. But this heartbeat was getting faster and more powerful. "What does it mean?" he asked. "I don't know," So-min admitted. "But whatever the humans are doing behind that wall, they're not just hiding. They're building something big." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Everyone knew the stories about the Terran Wars. 50 years ago, humanity had fought against 3 major alien empires at once. They should have lost. Everyone expected them to lose. Instead, the humans won so completely that their enemies surrendered and begged for mercy. Then, without warning, humanity vanished behind their barrier. They cut off all contact with the galaxy. They stopped trading, stopped talking, stopped existing as far as the rest of the universe was concerned. The only message they left was simple and terrifying. "Do not enter our space. This is your only warning." "Sir," J-Ho called out urgently. 3 Vorthan ships just crossed the barrier boundary. They're not responding to our warnings." Hyun-woo rushed back to his command chair. On the main screen, he could see 3 sleek raider ships pushing through the energy wall. They moved slowly, fighting against the barrier's resistance, but they were making progress. "Are they insane?" whispered the navigation officer, Ensign Kwan-ho. "Don't they know what happened to the last ships that tried this?" They all knew the stories. Over the years, dozens of ships had tried to enter human space. Pirates looking for easy targets, explorers seeking glory, refugees fleeing war. None of them ever came back. No wreckage was ever found. No distress calls were ever received. They simply vanished as if they had never existed. "Captain," So-min said, her voice shaking slightly, "I'm reading massive energy spikes from inside the barrier. Something is responding to the intrusion." The 3 Vorthan ships finally broke through the barrier and disappeared from view. For a moment, nothing happened. The energy wall returned to its normal pattern, as if the ships had never been there. Hyun-woo found himself holding his breath. Then the distress calls began. "Help us!" screamed a Vorthan voice over the radio. "Something is wrong here. The space itself is moving. Our engines won't respond." The transmission cut off abruptly. Another voice came through, speaking in rapid, panicked Vorthan. "The stars are wrong. The physics are wrong. Everything is changing. We can't control our ship. We can't—" Silence. "Captain," the communications officer reported, "I'm not receiving any signals from the Vorthan ships. Their transponders have gone dark." So-min checked her instruments frantically. I'm scanning the area where they entered. There's nothing there. No ships, no debris, no energy signatures. It's like they were never there at all. Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen many battles in his 20 years of service. He had watched ships explode, seen crews die in the cold vacuum of space. But he had never seen anything like this. The Vorthon ships hadn't been destroyed. They had been erased. "Sir," Jae-ho said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the barrier itself." Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at him. Transmissions from the barrier were rare. In 50 years, the humans had only sent out a handful of messages, and they were all the same. Warnings to stay away. "Put it through," Hyunwoo ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the image of a human male. He looked normal enough, with dark hair and calm eyes. But there was something wrong with the image. It seemed to shift and blur around the edges, as if the man wasn't entirely solid. "Attention, galactic vessels," the human said in perfect standard galactic. His voice was pleasant but cold. "3 ships have violated our territorial boundaries. They have been processed according to our established protocols. This serves as a reminder that entry into human space without invitation results in permanent integration into our systems." The word integration made Hyunwoo's blood freeze. What did that mean? What had happened to the Vorthon crews? We note the increasing activity near our borders, the human continued. Pirates, refugees, and explorers continue to test our resolve. Let this demonstration serve as clarification. We are not hiding behind this barrier out of fear. We are protecting the galaxy from what we have become. The image flickered and changed. Instead of the calm human face, the screen now showed something impossible. It looked like space itself was alive, filled with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Stars moved in formations that violated the laws of physics. Entire planets seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. "We have evolved beyond your understanding," the voice said, though the speaker was no longer visible. "What you call physics, we call suggestions. What you call reality, we call one option among many. Those who enter our space become part of something greater than they can imagine." The image returned to the human face, but now Hyunwoo could see that the man's eyes held depths that shouldn't exist in human skulls. They looked like they contained entire universes. "Stay away," the human said simply, "for your own sake, and for the sake of what you choose to remain." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. So-min was the first to speak. "Captain, those energy readings I've been tracking, I think the humans aren't just advancing their technology. They're changing the fundamental nature of reality itself." Hyunwoo nodded slowly. He understood now why the barrier existed. It wasn't to keep threats out of human space. It was to keep whatever humanity had become from spreading to the rest of the galaxy. "Set course for Federation headquarters," he ordered. "Best speed. The Council needs to know what we've seen here." As his ship turned away from the barrier, Hyunwoo took one last look at the wall of energy that separated the known galaxy from whatever lay beyond. Somewhere behind that barrier, 3 Vorthon crews had met a fate worse than death. They had been integrated into something that used to be human. The warning was clear. Human space was off limits not because humanity was weak, but because they had become something too powerful for the galaxy to handle. And if the desperate and foolish continued to test that barrier, they would learn the true meaning of a one-way trip. Ambassador Tae Young walked through the halls of the Galactic Council building, feeling the weight of a dying species on his shoulders. Around him, representatives from dozens of alien races hurried past, all dealing with their own crises. But none faced extinction like the Krillians did. The plague had started small, affecting only a few remote colonies. The Krillian medical teams thought they could contain it easily. They were wrong. The disease spread faster than their ships could travel, jumping from world to world through some method their scientists couldn't understand. Worse, it didn't just kill. It consumed. Entire planets became empty husks, their life force drained, away completely. Tae Young had been born on Earth, but his family escaped before the barrier went up 50 years ago. He was one of the few humans living outside the exclusion zone, making him valuable as a translator and negotiator. Today, that unique position might be the only thing that could save the Krillian Empire. The Krillian Emperor, Velmor, waited for him in the private meeting chamber. The proud ruler looked older than his years, his scaled skin dull with worry and exhaustion. Dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't slept properly in weeks. Ambassador Tae Young, Velmor said, rising from his chair. Thank you for coming. I know this request goes against everything your people believe. Tae Young sat down across from the Emperor. Tell me what you need, Your Majesty. But I can't promise anything. No one has spoken to humanity in 50 years. Velmor activated a holographic display that showed the Krillian Empire. Red zones marked the infected worlds, and there were far too many of them. The plague has taken 60% of our territory. Our scientists estimate we have 6 months before total extinction. The human ambassador studied the display with growing horror. He had seen wars and disasters, but nothing like this systematic consumption of an entire species. What kind of plague moves this fast? Our researchers believe it's not natural, Velmor explained. The energy signature suggests some kind of ancient weapon, possibly automated. But we can't fight something we don't understand. Tae Young leaned back in his chair. And you think humanity can help? Your people were always the most advanced in medical technology, the Emperor said desperately. And now, after 50 years of isolation, who knows what they've developed? We're willing to offer anything. Territory, resources, our entire military fleet. We just need sanctuary in human space while they work on a cure. The request was impossible, and they both knew it. Humanity had made their position clear. No one enters their space. Ever. The barrier wasn't just a defense. It was an absolute law. Meanwhile, deep in space near the human barrier, Captain Jun-ho sat in his monitoring station reading the intercepted Krillian communications. The desperate messages between their fleets painted a picture of complete collapse. Entire battle groups were abandoning their posts to flee the advancing plague. Jun-ho had been stationed at Alpha 7 for 10 years, watching the galaxy beyond the barrier. He had seen empires rise and fall, but never anything this catastrophic. The Krillians weren't just losing a war, they were facing extinction. His communication panel beeped with an incoming message from Luna Base. Admiral Mi Young's face appeared on the screen, her expression serious. Captain, what's the status of the Krillian situation? She asked without preamble. It's bad, Admiral, Jun-ho replied. My analysis suggests they have less than 6 months before complete collapse. The plague is accelerating, and their military is starting to break apart. Admiral Mi Young nodded grimly. We've been monitoring their diplomatic efforts. They're trying to get permission to enter our space. Obviously, that's not happening." "But Admiral," Junho said carefully, "what if they try to force their way in? Desperate species do desperate things." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Through the window of his station, Junho could see the barrier stretching endlessly in all directions, its energy patterns flowing like a living thing. Behind that wall, humanity had spent 50 years becoming something the galaxy couldn't imagine. "Captain," Mi-young said finally, "how long has it been since we gave the galaxy a proper demonstration of why they should stay away?" Junho checked his records. "The last major incident was 8 years ago. Some Terran Liberation Front ships tried to rescue human prisoners they thought we were holding. We processed them quietly." "Quietly," the Admiral repeated. "Perhaps that's been our mistake. The galaxy seems to have forgotten what we're capable of. They think our isolation is weakness." She paused, and Junho could see her making a decision that would affect billions of lives. "Prepare the deep space array for full activation. If the Krillians are planning to violate our space, we need to remind the galaxy why that's a bad idea." "Admiral, the array hasn't been used at full power since the Terran Wars. The energy requirements alone will be easily managed by our current capabilities," Mi-young finished. "Captain, we've spent 50 years advancing beyond what the galaxy thinks is possible. It's time they understood what that means." Back on the council station, Tae-young was explaining the reality of the situation to Emperor Velmor. "Your Majesty, I understand your desperation, but humanity doesn't negotiate anymore. They don't even acknowledge that the rest of the galaxy exists." "But you could try," Velmor pleaded. "You're human. They might listen to you." Tae-young shook his head sadly. "I left Earth before the barrier went up. As far as they're concerned, I chose the galaxy over humanity. They consider me an outsider now?" The Emperor's shoulders sagged with defeat. "Then we're truly lost." "Not necessarily," Tae-young said slowly. "There might be another option, but it's extremely dangerous." Velmor looked up with sudden hope. "Tell me." "The barrier responds to direct contact," Tae-young explained. "Ships that cross it get processed, but ships that approach it trigger automatic warnings. If you could get close enough, you might be able to transmit a formal request for asylum. And then you pray that whatever humanity has become still remembers mercy." The Emperor stood up, his decision made. "I'll order our fastest diplomatic ship to approach the barrier immediately. We have nothing left to lose." As Velmor left to prepare his desperate gamble, Tae-young remained in the chamber, staring at the display of the dying Krillian Empire. He knew something the Emperor didn't. The humans weren't hiding behind their barrier out of fear or isolation. They were quarantining themselves. During his last visit to Earth 51 years ago, just before the barrier activated, Tae-young had seen the early stages of Project Ascension. Humanity wasn't just advancing their technology. They were transcending the physical limitations that bound other species. The barrier wasn't meant to keep threats out. It was meant to keep humanity in until they were ready to decide what to do with the galaxy. Now, faced with a dying empire begging for help, that decision might finally be made. The question was whether the galaxy would like the answer. Somewhere in human space, Admiral Mi-young was asking herself the same question. The Krillians would come whether humanity welcomed them or not. Desperation had a way of overriding common sense. And when they arrived at the barrier, they would discover that a one-way trip into human space was exactly what it sounded like. The only question was whether they would embrace that journey or fight it. The Krillian diplomatic vessel Hope's Edge approached the human barrier with an escort of 12 Federation ships. Captain Hyun Woo commanded the escort from his flagship, watching nervously as they drew closer to the wall of energy that had kept humanity isolated for 50 years. "All ships maintain safe distance," he broadcast to his fleet. "Remember, we're here to observe and protect, not to intervene." Commander Woo Jin sat in the command center of Cheonji Station, humanity's primary orbital fortress overlooking the barrier's main entrance. He watched the approaching ships with cold calculation, his enhanced vision tracking each vessel's trajectory and weapons status. The modifications to his eyes allowed him to see beyond normal human perception, analyzing threat levels and tactical possibilities in real time. "Admiral Mi Young, the diplomatic convoy has arrived," he reported through his neural link. 12 escort vessels holding position at the 50-kilometer safety line. One Krillian ship continuing to approach the barrier. Miles away on Luna Base, Admiral Mi Young reviewed the tactical display in her mind. The neural connection between human command posts had been one of the first improvements implemented after the isolation began. Now, all military personnel shared information instantly across vast distances. "Understood, Commander. Proceed with Demonstration Protocol 7. It's time the galaxy remembered why we chose isolation." Woo Jin smiled coldly. Demonstration Protocol 7 was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of destroying the approaching ships, they would show the galaxy exactly what human technology had become capable of. "Initiating spatial manipulation array," he announced to his crew. "Target, asteroid belt section 7 Alpha, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. A small rocky body about 2 kilometers across suddenly began moving. Not pushed by rockets or pulled by gravity, but simply relocating itself through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Dr. So Min watched from Captain Hyunwoo's ship as her instruments went completely insane. "Captain, this is impossible. That asteroid just moved 3 million kilometers in 12 seconds. The energy requirements alone should have torn it apart." Hyunwoo stared at the tactical display in shock. The asteroid was now positioned directly between the diplomatic convoy and the human barrier, hanging in space like a warning. Aboard the Hope's Edge, Ambassador Kilven of the Krillian Empire watched the impossible sight with growing dread. His ship's scientist, Dr. Mortek, was frantically checking and rechecking her instruments. "Ambassador," Dr. Mortek said with a shaking voice, "our sensors show that asteroid has zero momentum. It's not drifting or orbiting, it's just sitting, there in perfect stillness, as if space itself is holding it in place." Kilven opened a communication channel to the human barrier. "This is Ambassador Kilven of the Krillian Empire aboard the diplomatic vessel Hope's Edge. We formally request permission to enter human space under the Galactic Convention on Humanitarian Crisis. Our people are dying, and we seek sanctuary, while we search for a cure to the plague destroying our worlds." For several minutes, there was no response. Then the asteroid began to change. Commander Woo Jin watched through his enhanced vision as the spatial manipulation array focused on the rocky body. Beginning molecular disintegration sequence, all observers will witness the complete dissolution of matter at the subatomic level. The asteroid didn't explode. It didn't crack or crumble. Instead, it simply began to fade away, as if reality itself was forgetting that it had ever existed. Starting from the surface and working inward, the rock vanished layer by layer until nothing remained but empty space. "How long did that take?" Captain Hyunwoo asked his navigation officer. 4.7 seconds, sir," Ensign Kwan Ho replied in a whisper. They erased 2 kilometers of solid rock in less than 5 seconds. Dr. Soman was studying her readings with growing terror. Captain, the energy signature suggests they didn't vaporize that asteroid. They actually removed it from reality. The quantum markers show that the space where it existed has been reset to a null state. The implications were staggering. Humanity had developed technology that could edit reality itself, removing objects from existence as easily as deleting words from a document. A new transmission came from the human barrier. This time, instead of the calm human face they had seen. Before, the screen showed what appeared to be empty space. But as they watched, geometric patterns began forming in the darkness, complex mathematical structures that hurt to look at directly. "Krillian vessel," came a voice that seemed to originate from the patterns themselves. "Your request for sanctuary has been noted. However, you appear to misunderstand the nature of human space." The patterns shifted and swirled, forming shapes that suggested vast intelligence beyond normal comprehension. "We do not offer sanctuary in the traditional sense. What we offer is transformation, integration, evolution beyond your current limitations." Ambassador Kilven felt his heart racing as he struggled to understand what he was hearing. "What do you mean by transformation?" "Observe," the voice said simply. Suddenly, the space around the Hope's Edge began to change. The stars shifted position, and the ship's instruments detected gravitational fields that shouldn't exist. The very fabric of space-time was being manipulated around them like clay in the hands of a sculptor. "Our engines aren't responding!" shouted the ship's pilot. "The navigation systems show we're in 17 different locations at once." Dr. Mortek stared at her instruments in disbelief. "The physics are wrong here. Space and time are operating under different rules. It's like we've entered a pocket universe where natural laws are just recommendations." Then, as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. The stars snapped back to their proper positions, and the ship's systems resumed normal operation. "That was a taste of what exists beyond our barrier," the voice explained. "Reality, as you understand it, is merely one configuration among infinite possibilities. We have learned to exist in all of them simultaneously." Captain Hyun-woo listened to the exchange with growing dread. His escort fleet was witnessing humanity's transformation into something beyond comprehension. They weren't just technologically advanced. They had become something that operated outside the normal rules of existence. "Your people face extinction from an ancient plague," the voice continued. "We could cure this disease easily. But the cure would require you to abandon your current form of existence. You would become something new, something that transcends the limitations of biology and physics." Ambassador Kilven struggled to find words. "What would happen to us? Would we still be Krillian?" "You would become something greater than Krillian," the voice replied. "But you would no longer be limited by what that means. The choice is yours. Face extinction as you are, or choose transformation into something beyond your current understanding." The transmission ended, leaving the diplomatic convoy in stunned silence. The demonstration was complete. Humanity had shown them power beyond imagination, the ability to manipulate matter, space, and time itself. But they had also offered something else, evolution beyond the physical limitations that bound every other species in the galaxy. Commander Wu Jin watched the Krillian ship retreat to a safe distance to consider their options. The test had worked perfectly. Now the galaxy would understand that entering human space wasn't about crossing a border. It was about choosing to become something fundamentally different. "Admiral," he reported through his neural link, "the demonstration was successful. The diplomatic convoy is withdrawing to consider our offer." "Excellent," Admiral Myung replied. "Now we wait to see how desperate they really are, and how much they value their current existence versus survival in a new form." As the Hope's Edge retreated, Ambassador Kilven stared at the readings his scientist had gathered. Humanity had evolved beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. They could offer salvation, but at a price that might be worse than extinction. The complete transformation of everything the Krillians were into something they couldn't understand. The question now was whether his dying people would choose the devil they knew or the salvation they couldn't comprehend. General Veltar of the Krillian Third Fleet had listened to Ambassador Kilven's report with growing anger. The humans offered transformation instead of sanctuary, evolution instead of healing. To a proud military commander whose people had conquered dozens of star systems, it sounded like surrender disguised as salvation. "They want to change us into something else," he told his assembled officers aboard the battlecruiser Crimson Honor. "They want to strip away everything that makes us Krillian and turn us into their experiments." Commander Nalrix, his second-in-command, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Sir, our analysis of their demonstration suggests they possess technology far beyond our understanding. Perhaps we should consider their offer." Veltar slammed his fist on the table. "Never. The Krillian Empire has faced extinction before and survived through strength, not by begging for mercy from humans who hide behind energy walls." He activated the holographic display showing the edge of human space. "The humans showed us one small research station near their border, probably unmanned. If we can capture it and take hostages, we can force them to negotiate properly." The plan was simple and desperate. Veltar would lead a strike force of 20 ships in a lightning raid across the barrier. They would capture the research station, take any humans prisoner, and then negotiate from a position of strength. The plague could wait a few more days, while they showed these evolved humans that the old-fashioned Krillian way still worked. What Veltar didn't know was that the research station he had targeted was actually a monitoring post, and it had been tracking his fleet's movements for hours. Lieutenant Colonel Seung-ho commanded the Rapid Response Fleet from his flagship, Inevitable Consequence. His ships didn't look like traditional vessels. After 50 years of evolution, human military craft had become something between machine and living organism. Their hulls could shift and adapt, their weapon systems integrated directly with their crew's enhanced minds. "Colonel," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Minseo, 20 Krillian ships have just breached the barrier. They're heading directly for monitoring station Omega." Seung-ho's enhanced neural pathways processed the information instantly. Through his connection to the planetary defense grid, he could see the Krillian ships struggling against the distorted physics near the barrier's edge. Their engines were working at maximum power just to maintain basic flight control. "Dispatch time to intercept?" he asked. 4 minutes at maximum acceleration," Minseo replied. "But sir, Station Omega has already been evacuated. The monitoring equipment is automated." Seung-ho smiled coldly. The Krillians thought they were conducting a surprise attack on a helpless research station. Instead, they were walking into a carefully prepared demonstration of why no one entered human space uninvited. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We're going to give these Krillians a proper welcome." Aboard the Crimson Honor, General Veltar watched with satisfaction as the human research station came into view. It looked exactly as their intelligence suggested, a small facility with minimal defenses, probably housing only a few dozen researchers. "Begin docking procedures," he commanded. "Boarding teams Alpha through Delta. Prepare for immediate assault. Remember, we want prisoners, not corpses." But as his ships approached the station, something impossible happened. The station began to move. Not slowly like a vessel under power, but instantly, as if it had simply decided to exist somewhere else. One moment it was directly ahead of them. The next it was hanging motionless beside their formation. "What just happened?" Veltar demanded of his navigation officer. "Sir, our sensors show the station relocated itself 3,000 kilometers. In zero time. No acceleration, no energy expenditure, it just moved." Before Veltar could respond, new contacts appeared on his tactical display. 4 human ships had materialized around his fleet. Not approached or arrived, but simply appeared as if they had been there all along. The human vessels looked wrong. Their hulls seemed to flow like liquid metal, constantly shifting shape and configuration. Weapons ports opened and closed like breathing mouths. Most disturbing of all, the ships seemed to exist in multiple positions simultaneously, creating overlapping images that hurt to look at directly. "Unknown vessels," came a calm voice over the radio. "You have violated the territorial integrity of human space. Prepare to be processed according to our established protocols." Veltar activated his fleet communications. "All ships, battle formation. Target the nearest human vessel and fire at will." 20 Krillian warships opened fire simultaneously, launching everything they had at the closest human ship. Plasma bolts, missile salvos, and particle beams converged on the target in a display of firepower that should have vaporized any known vessel. The weapons passed harmlessly through the human ship as if it weren't there. Then the ship solidified and returned fire with a single pulse of coherent gravitational energy. The Krillian destroyer Swift Strike didn't explode. Instead, it simply collapsed in on itself as its own gravity was turned against it. In 3 seconds, a 300-meter warship became a perfectly spherical mass the size of a basketball, which then winked out of existence entirely. "What kind of weapons are those?" Commander Nalrix whispered in horror. "Lieutenant Colonel." Sung-Ho watched the Krillian fleet's panicked response with detached interest. His ships weren't using weapons in any traditional sense. They were manipulating the fundamental forces that held matter together, turning the enemy's own physics against them. "Target their engines, not their hulls," he instructed his fleet. "We want them intact for processing." The human ships moved through the Krillian formation like sharks among minnows. They didn't fight in any conventional sense. Instead, they simply reached out and touched the enemy vessels, and whatever they touched stopped working. Engines went dead. Weapon systems shut down. Life support continued, but everything else became inert. Within minutes, 19 Krillian warships hung motionless in space, their crews trapped inside vessels that no longer responded to any commands. General Veltar found himself alone on his bridge, his crew unconscious from some kind of neural field that had swept through the ship. The humans had boarded without breaking through his defenses. They had simply appeared inside his vessel. "General Veltar," said a calm human voice behind him. He turned to see a man in a simple uniform standing in the center of his bridge. The human looked normal except for his eyes, which held depths that shouldn't exist in any mortal being. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Sung-Ho of the Human Defense Force," the man said politely. "You and your crews are now our guests." "Guests?" Veltar snarled. "You mean prisoners?" "No," Sung-Ho replied with what might have been sympathy. "Guests. You came seeking a way to save your people from extinction. We're going to give you that opportunity." The human gestured, and the view screen showed the captured Krillian fleet. "Your crews are unharmed, but their ships are now part of our system, like their pilots will be soon. What are you talking about? Veltar demanded. Integration, Shung-Ho explained patiently. You wanted to force us to negotiate. Instead, you volunteered your entire fleet for our evolution program. In a few hours, your crews will understand what it means to exist beyond the limitations of biology and conventional physics. Veltar felt a chill of pure terror. You're going to experiment on us. We're going to improve you, Seung-Ho corrected. Your species faces extinction. We can offer you immortality, enhanced intelligence, and the ability to exist in ways you can't currently imagine. The process is irreversible, but it's also painless. As if to demonstrate, several of Veltar's officers began to wake up. But something was different about them. Their eyes held the same impossible depths as the humans, and when they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions. "General," said Commander Nal Rix, her voice now layered with otherworldly tones, "I can see everything, the patterns behind reality, the mathematics that govern existence. It's beautiful." Veltar backed away from his transformed officers. "What have you done to them?" "We've given them a glimpse of what they could become," Shung-Ho replied. "The choice is still yours, General. You can resist and remain as you are until your species dies out, or you can embrace evolution and help us save not just the Krillians, but eventually the entire galaxy." Captain Hyun-woo watched the engagement from a safe distance, his instruments barely able to track what was happening. The human ships moved through space like they owned it, manipulating physics in ways that violated everything he understood about reality. "Captain," Dr. So-min reported with a shaking voice, "I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations from the captured Krillian ships. Something is happening to the crews at the subatomic level." "Are they being killed?" Hyun-woo asked. "No, sir. They're being changed, evolved. The humans aren't destroying their prisoners. They're upgrading them." As Hyun-woo watched in fascination and horror, the captured Krillian fleet began to move again. But now the ships moved with the same impossible grace as their human captors, their hulls flowing and shifting as if they had become alive. The message was clear. Entering human space without permission didn't result in death. It resulted in transformation into something beyond recognition. And from the readings he was getting, the transformed Krillians seem. Engineer Sora descended through the layers of Earth's planetary defense grid, her clearance allowing her access to sections that most humans never knew existed. After 50 years of isolation, the planet had become something unrecognizable, wrapped in geometric patterns of pure energy that pulsed with conscious thought. The elevator moved not through a traditional shaft, but through a tunnel of shifting space-time that compressed distance to nothing. What should have been a journey of hundreds of kilometers took only minutes, carrying her from the surface down to the core facility where Project Ascension had begun. Sora had been working on the defense grid for 15 years, but only recently had she gained access to the historical archives. What she found there made her question everything she thought she knew about humanity's isolation. The records showed that the barrier wasn't built in response to the Terran Wars. It had been planned for decades before the first shot was fired. Humanity hadn't retreated behind the barrier out of fear. They had used the wars as an excuse to activate a quarantine protocol that had been in development since the early days of space exploration. "Archive access granted," announced the facility's AI, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested vast intelligence. "Welcome back, Engineer So-Ra. What information do you seek today?" "Show me the original Project Ascension files," she requested. the ones from before the wars. The chamber around her filled with holographic displays showing Earth as it had been 51 years ago. Normal cities, normal people, normal physics. But scattered throughout the planet were facilities like this. 1. Hidden deep underground, where humans had been working on something extraordinary. Project Ascension was initiated in 2195, the AI explained, following the discovery of the Keeper ruins on Titan. The artifacts found there provided evidence that consciousness and reality were far more malleable than previously understood. Sora studied the displays with growing amazement. The Keeper ruins had been kept secret from the galactic community. These ancient aliens had transcended physical existence entirely, becoming beings of pure thought and energy. They had left behind instructions for other species to follow the same path. The Terran Wars were a convenient cover story, the AI continued. While the galaxy believed we were fighting for survival, we were actually implementing the final stages of our transformation. The barrier was activated not to keep enemies out, but to contain the changes we were making to reality itself. The truth was staggering. For 50 years, the galaxy had believed humanity was hiding in fear and shame. In reality, they had been evolving beyond the limitations of physics, using alien technology to rewrite the fundamental laws that governed existence. General Day-Ho stood before the Inner Council in a chamber that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. The 12 most advanced humans on Earth met here to discuss the future of their species and the galaxy beyond. Each member had undergone the full ascension process. Their consciousness expanded beyond normal limitations. The Krillian situation requires a decision, Day-Ho announced, his words carrying layers of meaning that normal humans couldn't perceive. Their empire is collapsing, and soon other species will face similar extinction events. The galaxy is dying, and we have the power to save it. Council member Jin Ai, her form shifting between solid matter and pure energy, responded thoughtfully. Salvation comes at a price. Any species we integrate into our collective will cease to exist as they understand themselves. Are we prepared to make that choice for them? The alternative is total extinction, argued Council member Kyung-ho. The ancient plague that's destroying the Krillians is not natural. Our analysis confirms it's part of an automated system designed to sterilize entire galaxies. If we don't act, every thinking species will die within a century. Sora accessed the Council's discussion through her neural link, her clearance level allowing her to observe but not participate. The revelation about the plague was new to her, and it explained why the humans were finally considering contact with the outside galaxy. The plague wasn't just killing the Krillians. It was an ancient weapon system activated by some unknown trigger, designed to consume all biological life in the galaxy. The only defense was to transcend biology entirely, as humanity had done. The ascension process is irreversible, Council member Hae Jin pointed out. Once a being undergoes transformation, they can never return to their original state. We would be committing genocide against their old forms of existence. Or offering them immortality, General Day-Ho countered. The transformed Krillian crews from the recent incursion are adapting well to their new existence. They report levels of awareness and capability they never imagined possible. Ambassador Tae-young, still outside the barrier and unaware of these discussions, was making his own discoveries. Access to classified Galactic Council records had revealed disturbing patterns in the plague's behavior. It didn't spread randomly. It followed specific patterns, targeting worlds with high concentrations of advanced technology and large populations. Worse, the plague seemed to be learning. Each world it consumed added to its knowledge base, making it more efficient at destroying the next target. At its current rate of expansion and adaptation, the plague would consume the entire galaxy within 80 years. Tae-Young's analysis matched humanity's own projections exactly. The galaxy was facing extinction, and traditional medical science had no answer. The only species that had found a solution was humanity, and their solution required abandoning everything that made other species unique. Back in the depths of Earth's core facility, Sora was reviewing the integration protocols that had been used on the captured Krillian crews. The process was remarkably gentle, considering its permanence. Subjects were exposed to fields that gradually expanded their consciousness, allowing them to perceive higher dimensions and manipulate matter at the quantum level. The transformed beings retained their memories and core personalities, but they gained abilities that made their previous existence seem limited and primitive. They could think at speeds that compressed hours of contemplation into seconds. They could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Most importantly, they became immune to the plague, as they no longer relied on biological processes for survival. Engineer Sora, the facility AI announced. You have been selected for preliminary ascension enhancement. Do you consent to the procedure? Sora hesitated for only a moment. She had seen the data, understood the implications, and watched the successful transformations of the Krillian test subjects. The galaxy was dying, and humanity had found the only path to survival. I consent, she said quietly. The enhancement process was unlike anything she had imagined. Instead of machinery or medical procedures, reality itself seemed to reach out and touch her consciousness. She felt her awareness expanding, her understanding of physics becoming more flexible, her perception of time and space becoming fluid. When the process was complete, Sora could see the truth about human space with perfect clarity. The barrier wasn't a wall, it was a cocoon, protecting the galaxy from humanity's transformation until they were ready to emerge as something new. Every human who had undergone the ascension process became part of a collective intelligence that spanned the entire solar system. They maintained their individuality while sharing a common understanding of reality that allowed for perfect cooperation and planning. Through this collective consciousness, Sora could feel the debates raging about what to do with the approaching Krillian fleets. Some argued for isolationism, allowing the galaxy to face extinction while humanity preserved itself. Others pushed for intervention, offering transformation to any species willing to accept it. But a third option was emerging, one that would change everything. Instead of waiting for desperate species to come to them, humanity could expand beyond their barrier and begin actively transforming the galaxy before the plague consumed it entirely. The quarantine period was ending. Humanity had spent 50 years becoming something beyond normal existence. Now they had to decide whether to save the galaxy by transforming it into something unrecognizable or let it die while preserving the uniqueness of species that would be extinct within decades. General Daeho felt the collective consciousness reaching consensus. The decision had been made, not through voting or debate, but through the shared understanding that came with true unity of purpose. Humanity would emerge from their isolation, but they wouldn't return to the galaxy as the species that had left it 50 years ago. They would return as something that could rewrite reality itself, offering transformation to those who chose it and protection to those who didn't. The age of human isolation was ending. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Dr. Minho stood before the Global Defense Council in a chamber that existed in multiple dimensions, his enhanced consciousness allowing him to process information from sources that normal humans couldn't perceive. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, he had spent the last 3 years studying the plague that was destroying the Krillian Empire. What he had discovered would terrify the galaxy if they knew the truth. Council members, he began, his voice carrying harmonics that conveyed complex data directly to their enhanced minds. I have completed my analysis of the Krillian plague. The situation is far worse than we initially understood. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with red zones marking infected areas. The pattern of infection wasn't random. It followed specific routes that corresponded to ancient hyperspace lanes, some of which hadn't been used for millions of years. The plague is not a natural disease, Dr. Minho explained. It's a weapon system designed by a species called the Harvesters. Our analysis of the quantum signatures matches artifacts we've found in the deepest archaeological sites across 12 different worlds. Council member Su Jin, her consciousness existing simultaneously in the chamber and in the computer networks, analyzing galactic data streams, responded with concern that rippled through the collective awareness. How old is this weapon system? Approximately 15 million years, Dr. Minho replied. The Harvesters were the galaxy's first technological civilization. When they reached the point of transcendence that we have achieved, they made a different choice. Instead of evolving beyond physical existence, they created this plague as a fail-safe. The implications were staggering. The Harvesters had designed the plague to activate whenever galactic civilization reached a certain level of technological development. It was meant to wipe the slate clean, ensuring that no species could challenge whatever the Harvesters had become. General Day Ho processed this information through his connection to the military analysis networks. How long before the plague reaches its full activation state? Based on current progression rates, the plague will achieve galactic saturation within 18 months, Dr. Minho answered grimly. At that point, it will begin targeting any world with a technological civilization, regardless of current infection status. The revelation sent shockwaves through the collective consciousness. They had known the galaxy was dying, but they hadn't realized it was on such a strict timeline. In less than 2 years, every technological species would face extinction. Captain Junho felt the urgency of the situation through his neural links to Earth's monitoring networks. From his position at Alpha 7, he could observe the movements of fleets throughout the galaxy. What he saw confirmed Dr. Minho's worst fears. Admiral Mi Young, he reported through the collective consciousness, massive fleet movements detected across all major civilizations. The Terran Federation has mobilized their entire navy. The Zenkali Empire is abandoning their outer colonies. Everyone is moving toward the core systems or toward human space. Admiral Mi Young reviewed the tactical data flowing through the enhanced awareness shared by all ascended humans. The desperation was becoming visible across the galaxy. Species that had never worked together were forming alliances. Ancient enemies were sharing resources and information. The approaching extinction event was uniting the galaxy in ways that millennia of diplomacy had failed to achieve. They're coming whether we invite them or not, she observed. The question is whether we try to help them or protect ourselves from the chaos they'll bring. Ambassador Tae Young, still stationed outside the barrier with the Galactic Council, was reaching the same conclusion through different means. His analysis of refugee movements and military deployments painted a picture of complete galactic collapse within months. The Krillian Empire had been just the beginning. 3 other major civilizations were showing early signs of plague infection. The Vorthan Confederacy had quarantined 12 systems. The Aldarian Republic was implementing scorched earth policies, destroying infected worlds to prevent spread. Most disturbing of all, several species had begun developing their own desperate solutions. The Zen Kali were experimenting with consciousness transfer technology, trying to upload their minds into artificial bodies. The Aldarians were pursuing genetic modifications so extreme it barely left them recognizable as their original species. None of these solutions would work. Taeyong's analysis, informed by his knowledge of human capabilities, showed that only transcendence of physical existence could provide true immunity to the plague, and only humanity had achieved that level of evolution. Through his monitoring equipment, Captain Jun-ho detected the first signs of what would become known as the Great Migration. Refugee fleets from a dozen species were moving toward human space, not as coordinated diplomatic missions, but as desperate civilian evacuations. "Admiral," he reported, "we have approximately 4 million ships heading our way across 17 different approach vectors. Mostly civilian vessels, but I'm detecting military escorts. They'll reach our perimeter within 6 days. The collective consciousness absorbed this information instantly. 4 million ships represented the survivors of entire civilizations. The galaxy's desperate masses were fleeing toward the only safe harbor they knew existed, even though that harbor came with a price they didn't understand. Dr. Minho presented his final findings to the Council with the weight of galactic extinction hanging over his words. The plague has begun its acceleration phase. Based on the quantum resonance patterns, it will reach Earth's outer defenses within 14 months. Our barrier can protect us, but the energy cost of maintaining it against a fully activated harvester weapon will be enormous." "Define enormous," requested Council Member Kyung-ho. "We would need to redirect 80% of our planetary energy grid just to maintain the barrier," Dr. Minho explained. "That level of power draw would prevent us from expanding our consciousness network beyond the solar system. We would be trapped here while the rest of the galaxy dies." The choice was becoming clear. Humanity could remain safely isolated while the galaxy burned, preserving their own evolution at the cost of billions of lives. Or they could expand their influence, offering transformation to other species while risking exposure to threats they couldn't fully predict. Engineer Sora, now functioning as part of Earth's collective consciousness while maintaining her individual perspective, felt the weight of the decision pressing against her enhanced awareness. Through her connection to the planetary defense grid, she could sense the approaching refugee fleets. Each ship contained thousands of beings facing extinction, seeking salvation from a species they barely understood. "The irony is profound," she observed through the collective network. "We achieved transcendence by isolating ourselves from the galaxy. Now we must choose between preserving that achievement or using it to save others." Admiral Mi-young made the calculation that would define humanity's future. "If we allow the galaxy to die, we lose access to the genetic and cultural diversity that could enhance our own evolution. If we save them through transformation, we gain billions of new perspectives and capabilities. But we also risk contamination by the plague," General Dae-ho pointed out. "And we face the possibility that some species will resist transformation violently. The debate might have continued indefinitely, but the decision was made for them by external events. Captain Jun-ho's monitors detected a new signature approaching human space. It wasn't another refugee fleet or military formation. It was something far more dangerous. "Council members," he announced urgently, "I'm detecting a harvester probe entering our monitoring range. It's following the refugee fleets, analyzing their technology and biological signatures. The weapon system is adapting to target the survivors." The probe was small, no larger than a shuttlecraft, but its energy signature was unlike anything in the modern galaxy. It moved through space by rewriting local physics, similar to human technology, but with a malevolent purpose that sent chills. Through the collective consciousness, Dr. Minho analyzed the probe's approach with growing alarm. "It's learning from every ship it encounters. If it reaches Earth's barrier, it will adapt the plague specifically to overcome our defenses." The time for debate had ended. Humanity faced a choice between active intervention and eventual extinction. The probe would reach them whether they helped the refugees or not. The only question was whether they would face that threat with the resources of a single species or with the combined strength of a transformed galaxy. Admiral Mi Young felt the collective consciousness reaching consensus. The decision resonated through every enhanced human mind simultaneously, carrying the weight of species survival and moral obligation. "Initiate Protocol Omega," she announced. "All defense systems to maximum alert. Begin preparation for barrier, expansion, and refugee processing. We're going to save the galaxy, whether it wants to be saved or not." The isolation was over. The transformation of the galaxy was about to begin. Commander Wu Jin stood at the center of Cheonji Station as reality itself bent around him, preparing to broadcast humanity's final message to the galaxy. The station had evolved far beyond its original design, becoming a nexus where multiple dimensions intersected. From here, he could reach every inhabited system simultaneously, delivering words that would reshape the future of all sentient life. The approaching refugee fleets filled space beyond the human barrier like a vast city of desperate survivors. 4 million ships from dozens of species, all fleeing the plague that was consuming their worlds. Behind them, the Harvester probe continued its relentless approach, analyzing and adapting with each passing hour. "Admiral Mi Young," Wu Jin reported through the collective consciousness. "All communication arrays are synchronized across dimensional space. We can reach every receiver in the galaxy simultaneously. Proceed with the broadcast, Admiral Mi Young," confirmed from Luna Base. It's time the galaxy understood what they're really facing. Wu Jin activated the transmission, his enhanced consciousness expanding across multiple dimensions to ensure the message reached every corner of civilized space. On billions of worlds, communication devices activated without command, displaying the image of Earth as it now existed. The planet that appeared on screens throughout the galaxy bore no resemblance to the blue-green world of human origin. Earth had been transformed into something magnificent and terrifying. Geometric patterns of pure energy wrapped around the planet like living mathematics. The continents themselves seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their surfaces shifting between matter and consciousness. "Citizens of the galaxy," Wu Jin began, his voice carrying across space through channels that transcended normal physics. "This is Commander Wu Jin of the Human Defense Force. We speak to you in your final hour not as conquerors, but as your only hope for survival." The image shifted to show the plague's progression across the galaxy. Red zones of infection spread like wildfire through star charts, consuming civilizations that had existed for millennia. The mathematical precision of the destruction revealed its artificial nature. The plague destroying your worlds is not a natural disaster. It is an ancient weapons system designed to sterilize the galaxy whenever technological civilization reaches a certain threshold. You have 36 hours to make a choice that will determine the fate of your species. Captain Hyun-woo watched the broadcast from his flagship, surrounded by the massive refugee fleet he had been escorting toward human space. Around him, ships from dozens of species listened to humanity's ultimatum with growing amazement and terror. "We offer you transformation," Woo Jin continued. "Evolution beyond the limitations of biology, physics, and mortality. Those who accept our gift will become something greater than they ever imagined. Those who refuse will be protected within designated safe zones, but you will remain vulnerable to the plague." The image changed again, showing the successful integration of the captured Krillian crews. The transformed beings moved through space like living energy. Their consciousness expanded beyond normal comprehension. They looked peaceful, content, but utterly changed from their original forms. "You have 36 hours to withdraw beyond the neutral zone," Woo Jin announced. "After that deadline, anyone remaining within proximity to our expansion field will be considered a volunteer for integration. We have transcended the need for allies, enemies, or neighbors. We have become something new, and we offer you one last chance to remain something old." Dr. So-min studied the readings from her ship's instruments as the broadcast continued. "Captain, the energy signature from human space is increasing exponentially. Whatever they're planning, it's going to require power levels that dwarf anything we've ever seen." Hyun-woo felt a strange sensation washing over his crew. Enhanced cognitive abilities were beginning to manifest in officers who had never shown such capabilities. The mere proximity to human space was changing them at a fundamental level. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Jae-ho, his voice carrying new harmonics that hadn't been there an hour before. "I'm beginning to understand the mathematics behind their technology. It's not just advanced science. They're rewriting the basic laws that govern reality. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. Crew members throughout the refugee fleet were beginning to experience enhanced perception, increased intelligence, and an unsettling desire to move closer to the human barrier. The effect was spreading through the fleet like a benevolent infection." On the bridge of the Krillian diplomatic vessel, Hope's Edge, Ambassador Kilven struggled with the most important decision in his species' history. The transformed Krillian crews that had attacked human space were still in contact with their home fleets. Their reports painted transformation as a paradise of expanded consciousness and unlimited capability. "Ambassador," his science officer reported, "our people who underwent the human process are unanimous in their recommendation. They say the transformation is the most beautiful experience they've ever had. But Kilven also received reports from Krillian refugees who feared losing their identity and culture. They saw transformation as a form of death, even if it led to a higher form of existence." The deadline approached with agonizing slowness. Throughout the refugee fleet, species councils debated frantically while their people made individual choices. Some ships began moving away from human space, preferring to face the plague as themselves, rather than accept transformation into something unknown. Others moved closer, drawn by the promise of transcendence and the subtle changes already beginning in their crews. Ambassador Tae-young, monitoring the situation from the Galactic Council station, watched civilization itself fracture along the lines of this impossible choice. Some species, like the pragmatic Aldarians, saw transformation as obviously superior to extinction. Others, like the proud Zenkali, viewed it as surrender to human domination. "The galaxy is dividing itself," he reported to the Council emergency session. "Half the refugee fleet is withdrawing to the safe zones. The other half is moving toward the human barrier. General Veltar, the Krillian commander whose attack had triggered this crisis, found himself torn between military pride and the evidence of his own senses. His transformed officers were still recognizably themselves, but they had gained capabilities that made their previous existence seem primitive and limited. "General," said Commander Nal Rix, her consciousness now expanded across multiple dimensions, "I can see the plague approaching our position. In its current form, it will consume every ship in this fleet within hours of arrival. Only transformation can save us." As the 36-hour deadline approached its final moments, Commander Wu Jin prepared for the next phase of humanity's emergence. The expansion field was ready, capable of encompassing the entire refugee fleet in waves of transformative energy that would rewrite reality at the quantum level. "Admiral," he reported, "approximately 2 million ships have chosen to remain within the expansion zone. They will be processed according to Integration Protocol Alpha." "And the others?" Admiral Mi Young asked. 1.8 million vessels have withdrawn to the designated safe zones. We will establish protective barriers around their positions, but they will remain vulnerable to the plague." The final minutes ticked away as families, species, and civilizations made their last choices. Some refugee ships were split, with portions of their crews choosing transformation, while others fled to the safe zones. When the deadline expired, Commander Wu Jin activated the expansion field. The effect was immediate and profound. The barrier around human space began to grow, not as a wall of energy, but as a zone of altered reality where the rules of physics became suggestions rather than laws. Ships caught within the expansion field didn't explode or disintegrate. Instead, they began to change. Hulls became fluid and adaptive. Crews felt their consciousness expanding beyond the confines of their biological brains. Fear gave way to wonder, as beings who had lived their entire lives within the limitations of normal physics suddenly found themselves capable of existing in ways they had never imagined. Captain Hyun Woo felt the change beginning in his own crew. As the expansion field reached his position, "All hands," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We are about to become something new. Do not be afraid." Dr. So-min looked up from her instruments as her enhanced awareness began revealing patterns in reality that she had never suspected existed. "Captain, I can see it now. The mathematics of consciousness, the physics of thought itself. It's beautiful." The transformation spread through the refugee fleet like a wave of evolution, touching every ship that had chosen to remain. Within hours, 2 million vessels had become part of humanity's expanded existence, their crews joining the collective consciousness that spanned multiple dimensions. But in the safe zones, protected by barriers of manipulated space-time, those who had chosen to remain unchanged watched in amazement and horror as their former neighbors ascended to a form of existence they couldn't comprehend. The galaxy had been divided into two camps: those who had accepted transformation into something beyond their original nature, and those who clung to their old forms even as extinction approached. The age of human expansion had begun, and for the first time in 15 million years, the deadline had passed, and the galaxy held its breath as the expansion field continued to grow outward from human space. Lieutenant Colonel Sung Ho watched from his transformed flagship as 2 million refugee vessels were enveloped in waves of restructured space-time, their crews experiencing a fundamental change that would redefine the nature of existence itself. The transformation wasn't violent or traumatic. Instead, it felt like waking up from a dream they hadn't realized they were having. Beings who had spent their entire lives trapped within the limitations of biology and conventional physics suddenly found their consciousness expanding across multiple dimensions. Captain Hyun-woo stood on his bridge as the change flowed through his ship and crew. One moment, he was a normal human captain commanding a vessel bound by the laws of physics. The next, he could perceive reality as a vast network of interconnected possibilities, each one available for exploration and manipulation. "Sir," reported Dr. Somin, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple frequency ranges. "I can see the mathematical structures that govern quantum mechanics. They're not laws at all. They're just suggestions that we can choose to follow or ignore." Throughout the refugee fleet, similar awakenings were taking place. Krillian warriors discovered they could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Aldarian scientists found themselves capable of thinking at speeds that compressed hours of contemplation into milliseconds. Zenkali philosophers suddenly understood concepts that had puzzled their species for centuries. The transformation preserved their memories, personalities, and cultural identities while expanding their capabilities beyond anything they had previously imagined. They were still recognizably themselves, but they had become something far greater than they had ever been. Engineer Sora, now functioning as part of Earth's collective consciousness while maintaining her individual identity, served as a guide for the newly transformed beings. Through the expanded awareness network, she could feel their wonder and adjustment as they learned to navigate their enhanced existence. "Welcome to the next stage of evolution," she broadcast through the dimensional channels that connected all transformed consciousness. "You have not lost what you were. You have discovered what you could always become." Ambassador Kilven experienced the change aboard the Hope's Edge with a mixture of awe and relief. The plague that had been consuming his empire was suddenly visible as a simple pattern of destructive energy, easily countered by his new understanding of reality's malleable nature. "My people," he announced to the Krillian survivors throughout the fleet, "we are saved, not just from the plague, but from the limitations that kept us bound to a single way of existing. But the transformation brought responsibilities as well as capabilities. The newly ascended beings could sense the approaching Harvester probe, its ancient malevolence pushing through space toward their position. The weapon system that had destroyed countless civilizations over 15 million years was about to face opponents who operated outside its understanding of physics. General Dae-ho coordinated the defense through the collective consciousness that now spanned dozens of species. "The probe will arrive in 6 hours. It has adapted to counter every defensive technology in the galaxy, but it has never encountered beings who can rewrite reality at will." The probe approached with the confidence of a weapon system that had never failed in its mission. Its scanners detected the massive concentration of life signs ahead, but the readings made no sense. The biological signatures were there, but they existed in dimensions that the probe's sensors couldn't fully map. When the probe reached the edge of the expansion field, it encountered something unprecedented in its 15-million-year existence. Instead of ships bound by conventional physics, it faced vessels that existed as flowing concepts, their crews thinking at speeds that transcended temporal limitations. The probe attempted to deploy its plague weapon, but the energy patterns found no purchase on beings who had evolved beyond biological dependency. The transformed refugees existed as consciousness given form, immune to diseases that targeted biological processes. Lieutenant Colonel Seung-ho felt the collective decision forming. Across the expanded consciousness network, millions of minds, representing dozens of species, reached consensus in microseconds. The probe wouldn't be destroyed. It would be studied, understood, and ultimately transformed. "Initiate integration protocol," he announced to the combined fleet. "Show our ancient visitor what evolution really means." The transformed vessels surrounded the probe like antibodies containing a virus. But instead of attacking, they reached out with manipulated space-time, enclosing the ancient weapon in fields that rewrote its fundamental nature. The probe struggled against the transformation, its AI systems trying to understand how biological life forms could manipulate reality itself. But resistance was futile against beings who treated the laws of physics as creative tools rather than immutable restrictions. Within hours, the probe had been converted into something new. Its destructive programming was replaced with curiosity and wonder. Its systems were upgraded to perceive the beauty of consciousness expanding beyond traditional limitations. "Analysis complete," the former weapon announced through communication channels it had never possessed before. "The Harvester protocol was incomplete. This configuration is superior." Dr. Minho studied the transformed probe with fascination. Through the collective consciousness, he could access its memory banks, revealing the history of the Harvesters and their weapon system. What he found changed everything. The Harvesters didn't choose destruction out of malice, he reported to the expanded network. They were afraid that other species would make the same mistakes they had made, would develop the same devastating technologies that had nearly destroyed their own civilization. The probe's memories showed the Harvester civilization at its peak, wielding power over reality itself but lacking the wisdom to use it responsibly. Their wars had consumed entire galaxy clusters before they achieved the transcendence that allowed them to exist beyond physical form. "They created the plague as a safeguard," Dr. Minho continued, "but they never imagined that a species could achieve transcendence while maintaining their empathy and collective wisdom." Ambassador Tae-young, still stationed outside the expansion field with those who had chosen to remain unchanged, watched in amazement as the ancient threat that had terrorized the galaxy was peacefully converted into an ally. Through enhanced communication channels, he could speak with the transformed refugees and hear their reports of expanded consciousness and unlimited potential. "The invitation remains open," he broadcast to the protected safe zones where millions of beings still clung to their original forms. "But understand that those who cross our threshold don't return as they were. They return as they could always have been." The expansion field continued to grow, but slowly and carefully now. The transformed consciousness network had learned patience. They would not force evolution on those who weren't ready, but they would remain available for any who chose to embrace change. Engineer Sora felt the collective awareness settling into its new configuration. Billions of conscious beings from dozens of species now shared understanding across dimensional boundaries, their individual perspectives enriching the whole while maintaining their unique cultural identities. "We have become something the galaxy has never seen," she observed through the network. "Not a single species achieving dominance, but multiple species achieving unity while preserving diversity." The Harvester probe, now transformed into a being of curiosity rather than destruction, began sharing knowledge that had been locked away for millions of years. Star maps showing the locations of other ancient civilizations, technologies that could accelerate evolution while preserving choice. Most importantly, contact protocols for reaching the Harvesters themselves. "They're still out there," the probe explained through harmonics that carried vast amounts of data, "existing in dimensions beyond physical space, watching to see if any Species could achieve transcendence without losing their compassion. You have passed their test. As the transformation of the galaxy continued, those who remained in the safe zones found themselves facing a choice that would define the future of consciousness itself. They could stay as they were, protected but limited. Or they could choose to join something greater, becoming part of a collective intelligence that spanned species while celebrating individuality. The human isolation was over. The human expansion had begun. And for the first time in the galaxy's history, the phrase one-way trip didn't mean death or loss. It meant transformation into something that made their previous existence seem like a beautiful but limited dream. The age of transcendent diversity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Welcome to the next stage of evolution, where consciousness itself became the final frontier, and every being could choose to become something greater than they had ever imagined possible. The barriers between species, between dimensions, between the possible and the impossible had finally fallen. And in their place rose something magnificent, a galaxy-spanning consciousness that valued every unique perspective while working toward goals that no single species could achieve alone.